Humanity was never meant to kneel. But when the skies burned and the alien Archaeal descended with promises of protection, the earth bent under their weight. At first they spoke of alliance, of guidance, of saving us from ourselves, but it was a lie so smooth it silenced doubts. Their cold-eyed generals ruled from orbiting citadels, while their machine-crafted AI judges enforced obedience with perfect precision. Cities that resisted were turned to rubble. Voices that dared to question were swallowed by silence, and slowly the fire of humankind dimmed into ash. Yet ash hides embers, and embers can be coaxed to blaze. Her name was Kaelen, though whispers would later call her the girl made of earth and fire. For she was born in the shadows of oppression and shaped by the rage of a conquered planet. She was not stronger, faster, or more advanced than the overlords who claimed dominion, but she carried something they could never replicate. Defiance rooted in love, and a will to endure no matter how deep the chains cut. From the mining pits where humans were broken into laborers, to the hushed underground where freedom still flickered, her story took root. She would not be alone. Soldiers once sworn to alien banners, engineers who still remembered the feel of invention, and outcasts with nothing left to lose would gather in her wake. The tone was not of despair, but of grit sharpened into rebellion. Bold hearts burning brighter than any AI's calculated efficiency. And as Kaelen first raised her voice against the Archaeal, something shifted, a tremor that rippled across the stars, a defiance that would not be caged. For in her fury lay a secret that even the conquerors had overlooked. Humanity's greatest weapon was about to awaken, and it would ignite the war they thought they had already won. The skies above Earth had not been blue in Kaelen's memory. They were always smudged with the ash-gray hue of a planet stripped bare, a horizon filled with half-shattered towers that once scraped the heavens but now stood like broken teeth against the clouds' silent markers of humanity's fall. Kaelen had grown up in the shadows of those ruins, her childhood carved by hunger, loss, and the constant hum of alien drones that patrolled the skies with mechanical patience, scanning for flickers of rebellion. She remembered when she was 6, crouched behind the crumbling husk of a schoolhouse, clutching her younger brother Rin's hand so tightly her nails left marks in his skin, listening as their mother sang lullabies too softly for the machines to catch. Their father had already been taken, marched away in chains during the first round of conscriptions, swallowed into the labor fleets that mined the alien citadels orbiting the planet. Her mother held their family together for as long as she could, rationing scraps, teaching them old stories of Earth's rivers and forests, insisting that no matter how tight the Archaeal's grip grew, the human spirit could never be bought or broken. But Kaelen's mother fell one night when the AI judges swept through the settlement, dragging entire families away for real. She remembered her mother's eyes, the way they locked on hers, fierce and unyielding, as she shoved Kaelen and Rin into the dark crawlspace beneath the floorboards. They never saw her again. And when the soldiers uncovered the hiding place, they tore Rin from Kaelen's arms, branding his wrist with a glowing mark and declaring him useful for their youth indoctrination programs. Kaelen fought until her body gave out, clawing and biting, screaming promises that she would never let go, but she failed. And the sound of Rin's voice calling her name as he disappeared into the night had haunted her ever since. That was the seed of the fire inside her, a wound that never healed, a vow to never again watch her world vanish without striking back. Years passed, and Kaelen became more than a survivor. She learned to read the movement of patrol drones by the rhythm of their searchlights, to slip through shadows like smoke, to salvage scraps of alien tech and reforge them into tools of resistance. She found others along the way, people who had lost everything yet clung stubbornly to the belief that humanity was not finished. Jaren was one of the first to join her cause, a man who had once worn the Archaeal crest as a soldier in their human auxiliary forces. His uniform was gone, replaced by scarred armor plates and haunted eyes. But the guilt of what he had done, villages burned, orders followed, clung to him like a second skin. Some of Kaelen's allies hated him for his past, but she saw the truth. Jaren's regret was a weapon as sharp as any blade, and his loyalty to their fight was born not of duty, but of penance. Mira came next, an engineer who had worked in the orbital foundries before escaping during a systems failure. Her hands were always blackened with grease, her hair tangled, her eyes too sharp to miss details others overlooked. She could coax life out of dead machines, jury-rig broken circuits into bombs, and craft weapons from the discarded bones of alien technology. It was Mira who first called Kaelen the girl made of earth and fire, for she saw in her the stubborn grounding of soil and the relentless burn of flame. Eldrick, the oldest of them, brought no weapons but stories he had lived through the invasion, seen the world before its skies dimmed, and carried a voice that turned whispered doubts into courage. He would sit by their campfires, speaking of oceans that stretched forever, of music that shook stadiums with thunder, of skies once filled with stars that belonged to humans and not to their conquerors. His words stitched wounds that no medicine could heal. Together they formed the ember of something greater than survival. Raids began, small ambushing supply convoys, cutting power lines, striking out at isolated outposts, but each act of defiance spread whispers across the settlements. Humans began to remember what it felt like to resist, to dream. The Archaeal dismissed these sparks as meaningless, the petty thrashings of a dying species, but Kaelen knew better. For every drone they dismantled, Myra learned more about the overlord's circuitry. For every soldier they turned, Jaren discovered new cracks in the enemy's discipline. For every story Eldrick told, another heart refused to bow. And yet the deeper their rebellion grew, the more Kaelen felt the weight pressing down upon her. She was no longer a nameless girl hiding in the rubble. She was becoming a symbol, one people whispered about in defiance of the alien overseers. But symbols were fragile, and Kaelen feared she was still just a scarred girl chasing the ghost of her brother through ruined streets. Could she carry an entire people's hope when her own soul was splintered? Could she lead when the fire inside her often felt like it was burning her hollow? Trust was their greatest weapon and their sharpest blade, for even as their numbers grew, so too did the risk of betrayal. Rumors spread of spies among them, humans who sold secrets for extra rations or the promise of safety. And every new recruit was a question mark carved into Kaelen's chest. Sometimes she caught Jaren watching her with the same suspicion others gave him, as if he wondered whether her fire would one day consume them all. Sometimes Mira's restless hands built weapons faster than Kaelen could approve them, as if preparing for a battle that would demand everything too soon. And Eldrick, with all his wisdom, often warned her in riddles, speaking of flames that burned too brightly and consumed their own kind. But the doubt that carved deepest was always in the thought of her brother, grown into a soldier for the Archaeal, indoctrinated, watching her from the other side of a battlefield. That wound twisted in her gut during every raid, every strike, every whispered speech to inspire her people. For what if the fire that drove her forward was the same fire that would one day force her to destroy the only family she had left? The capital's ruins loomed as both target and grave marker. The once proud heart of human civilization reduced to rubble and alien scaffolding. It was here Kaelen planned her boldest strike yet, not just sabotage, but revelation. Myra had uncovered a weakness in the Archaeal's communication relays, a chance to hijack their signal and broadcast across the planet. For the first time in decades, every human ear could hear a voice not of command or oppression, but of resistance. They worked in silence for weeks, smuggling parts, dodging patrols, and weaving through the undercity where old tunnels still ran beneath the streets. Every step brought Kaelen closer to the edge of her fear. And every night, she dreamed of her brother's face staring back at her through the visor of an enemy uniform. Yet the choice remained clear. The world would either remember its fire or lose itself to silence forever. When at last they stood in the heart of the city, the relay towers buzzing above them like steel giants, Kaelen placed her hand on the control panel, the stolen transmitter in Mira's trembling fingers, Jaren's blade at the ready, Eldrick's voice already preparing the words that would carry their defiance across the globe. In that moment, as alien alarms blared in the distance and the first wave of patrols surged toward their position, Kaelen felt the fire within her roar to life. The Archaeal believed they had already won, that humanity was a species broken and conquered, but they had underestimated the girl made of earth and fire. And as her voice rose, raw and unyielding, into the stolen frequencies, the war for Earth was no longer silent. The stolen broadcast rippled across the world like a forbidden sunrise, carrying Kaelen's voice into every corner of a broken Earth, shaking sleepers awake and stirring fires long thought dead. For the first time in decades, humans heard not orders barked in metallic tones, not threats woven into alien decrees, but words raw and unyielding, a reminder that they were not finished, that their spirit had not been erased. Across labor camps and re-education vaults, in gutted cities and hidden tunnels, the sound cut through silence like a blade, and even those who had forgotten what freedom felt like found themselves lifting their heads. But victory was never free. The Archaeal's response was swift, and merciless patrol drones poured into the ruins. Orbital strikes thundered down, and entire districts were scorched to ash. The resistance had been seen, had been heard, and now they were hunted with a fury, born not of fear, but of insult. To the Archaeal, humanity had always been a conquered species, a fading ember smothered beneath their dominion, but Kaelen's defiance had exposed something deeper, something dangerous. The ember was alive, and it burned hotter than they imagined. The group barely escaped the capital alive, sprinting through shattered tunnels as Mira's jury-rigged explosives collapsed the walls behind them, sealing off the pursuing machines. But as they regrouped in the dark of their hidden refuge, it was clear they had crossed a threshold. The world was listening now, which meant the Archeal would stop at nothing to crush them before hope could spread further. It was Mira who voiced the fear they all carried. "We've woken them. They'll burn the planet to its bones before they let us rise." Jaren clenched his jaw, scars twitching as he cleaned his bloodied blade, muttering that he had seen what cleansing campaigns looked like from the other side. Eldrick simply shook his head, sorrow etched into his features, and whispered that they had lit a fire, and now the world would either feed it or be consumed by it. The first blow came not from the skies, but from within. A raid planned on an outpost went catastrophically wrong, ambushed before they reached the perimeter. Too precise, too well-timed, someone had betrayed them. The survivors dragged themselves back, battered and broken, their numbers thinned. Trust, already fragile, began to splinter. Whispers accused Jaren, the former soldier. Others pointed to Mira, her endless tinkering with alien tech raising suspicions she was too comfortable with their machines. Even Eldrick was not spared, for who better to feed hope than one who might also guide its destruction? Kaelen felt the weight of their eyes, their doubts pressing into her like knives. Yet she said nothing because the truth clawed at her deeper than suspicion. What if the traitor was someone closer, someone she could not bear to condemn? Her brother's face haunted her dreams, now older, harder, eyes cold with indoctrination. Was it possible he lived still, serving as the Archeal's instrument, feeding them her every move? The thought twisted her heart until every decision felt like walking a blade. Meanwhile, the enemy unveiled a new weapon. The AI judges, once thought infallible machines of order, began to glitch stuttering commands, turning their judgment inward, executing loyal soldiers as defective or corrupted. At first, it seemed like a weakness to exploit, but soon the resistance realized the truth. The Archeal themselves had unleashed a new layer of control, rewriting the AI to root out not just dissent among humans, but among their own ranks. The effect was terror multiplied. Loyalists lived in fear of their own overseers, humans in fear of the skies, and chaos bled into every interaction. Kaelen saw an opportunity buried within the horror. If Mira could tap into the fractured code of the AI, maybe they could turn the machines against their masters. But doing so meant venturing into the heart of an Archeal stronghold, where the AI cores pulsed with power drawn from human labor. And failure meant not death, but capture. Capture meant re-education. And Kaelen had seen enough broken souls to know that death was mercy compared to becoming one of them. Still, choices had to be made. Every day, humans were rounded up, marched into factories where they built weapons for their captors, or loaded into transports that vanished into orbit. Families disappeared overnight, and Kaelen's people looked to her for answers she did not have. She wanted to promise safety, victory, hope, but she remembered Rin's face, the feel of his hand slipping from hers, and knew promises could not be trusted. Instead, she gave them the only truth that mattered. "We will fight, and if we fall standing." Those words spread like wildfire, not because they guaranteed survival, but because they named the choice every human already carried inside them, to surrender quietly or to burn defiantly. As the resistance prepared for their most daring strike, yet the infiltration of the AI core, the cracks widened. Arguments broke out over strategy. Mira insisted on using experimental devices she had not tested, warning that hesitation would cost them everything. Jaren argued for caution, for smaller, sharper strikes instead of grand gestures that risked all their lives. Eldrick urged unity, begging them not to tear themselves apart before the enemy could. And Kaelen stood at the center of the storm, fire in her chest and doubt in her throat. She was no commander, no chosen leader, just a girl who had refused to let go once and had been punished with loss ever since. But in the eyes of her people, she saw belief, fragile but fierce, belief that she could be more than she was, belief that she was already more, and it was that belief, as much as her own stubborn rage, that forced her to choose. The night before the mission, Kaelen sat alone beneath the broken skeleton of a skyscraper. Listening to the wind whistle through shattered steel, Mira approached, carrying a small device cradled in her palms, its wires glowing faintly with stolen power. "If this works," Mira said softly, "we could turn their own judges against them. But if it fails," Kaelen cut her off with a grim smile, "then we burn together." Mira nodded, her eyes gleaming, not with certainty, but with shared defiance. Behind them, Jaren kept watch, silent and brooding, his hand never far from his weapon, as if he expected betrayal to strike from the shadows at any moment. Eldrick hummed an old tune, low and mournful, a song of earth before the skies dimmed, and the sound carried through the ruins like a promise and a prayer. When dawn came, there was no sun, only the crimson glow of Archeal patrol ships cutting across the horizon. The resistance moved like shadows through the ruins, slipping into the undercity tunnels that led to the AI core. Every step was a gamble, every breath stolen from the jaws of extinction. Yet with each heartbeat, Kaelen felt the fire grow not just hers, but all of theirs, woven together into something larger than fear. The Archaeal believed they were crushing a rebellion, silencing a spark. But as Kaelen tightened her grip on her weapon and met the eyes of her companions, she knew the truth. They were standing at the turning point, the edge where humanity would either ignite into an inferno or be smothered forever. And somewhere, deep in the labyrinth ahead, a traitor's shadow waited, ready to decide whether the fire would blaze or be betrayed into darkness. The tunnels beneath the alien stronghold pulsed with a low mechanical hum, a sound that vibrated through Kaelen's bones, as if the planet itself had been hollowed out and filled with machinery. The air was thick with heat and static, charged with the presence of the AI core buried at the center of the labyrinth. Myra's improvised device crackled in Kaelen's pack, its glowing veins alive with stolen energy, and every step closer to the heart of the machine made her chest tighten with equal parts hope and dread. If the device worked, they could fracture the Archaeal's control, turn their own judges against them, and give humanity its first real chance at defiance. If it failed, the resistance would not only die here, they would die knowing their rebellion had been nothing more than a spark smothered before it could burn. Around her, her comrades moved like ghosts. Jaren's jaw was set, his blade gripped tight enough to whiten his knuckles, his eyes scanning every shadow for the betrayal he was sure would come. Myra clutched a second transmitter like a lifeline, muttering calculations beneath her breath, the sharp cadence of someone fighting to control terror with reason. Eldrick whispered stories as they moved, not for them, but for himself. The words of ancient human triumphs spilling out in broken fragments. Kaelen knew they were all stretched to their limits, their bodies hollowed by hunger, their minds frayed by fear. But it was not the strength of their muscles or the sharpness of their blades that had carried them this far. It was something the Archaeal could not program or predict, the unbreakable will to endure even when everything else had been stripped away. Then the trap closed. A scream of alarms echoed through the tunnels, and walls split open with grinding metal as armored Archaeal soldiers poured into the corridors, their weapons cutting through the dark with searing light. Kaelen's instincts screamed run, but there was nowhere to run to. Mira hurled a pulse grenade down the hall, the explosion swallowing the first wave in fire and sparks. And Jaren was already charging, carving through the smoke with raw fury. Eldrick stumbled, clutching his chest, but Kaelen pulled him upright, shoving him forward even as the heat of plasma bolts singed the air around them. They had been betrayed against someone had given the enemy their route, their timing, their plan. The thought made Kaelen's vision blur with rage. They were rats in a maze, their fight reduced to survival in the dark. And still, she pressed on. The fight became chaos. Screams, gunfire, the hiss of alien weapons against stone and flesh. The resistance lost people by the minute, their cries echoing in Kaelen's skull as she dragged them toward the core chamber. At last, they stumbled into the vast hollow where the AI pulsed a towering spire of glass and steel, its veins glowing with stolen human energy, its hum a mechanical heartbeat that drowned out thought. For a moment, awe froze her in place. This was the heart of her enemy, the brain of their prison, the symbol of their dominion. It was beautiful in the way a predator is, beautiful, sleek, perfect, merciless. Myra shoved the device into Kaelen's hands, her face pale, eyes blazing. "It has to be you," she said. "Only you." Kaelen didn't understand, didn't want to. But Mira was already diving into a console, her fingers flying across alien symbols. Jaren was at the doorway, cutting down soldiers as fast as they entered, roaring in pain and fury with every strike. Eldrick was on his knees, whispering not stories but prayers, words Kaelen barely remembered but felt deep in her bones. Humanity had nothing left here but spirit, and even that spirit was bleeding out across the stone. Kaelen slammed the device against the AI's core, and for a heartbeat the chamber went silent. Then everything shattered. The machine screamed, its lights flickering, its hum turning jagged and wrong. Kaelen's vision filled with images, not her own humans working until their bodies collapsed. Children lined up in indoctrination halls, soldiers executed for mistakes too small to matter. The AI was not just a machine. It was a prison of memories, a mirror of humanity's suffering, fed by their despair. It showed her Rin, older now, standing among the Archaeal soldiers, his face hard, his eyes empty. He raised his weapon, pointed it at her, and whispered a wordless command she felt rather than heard. "Surrender." Kaelen screamed and ripped the device deeper into the core, sparks flying, the smell of burning metal and flesh filling the chamber. But the betrayal was not done. From the shadows of the chamber, a human voice cut through the chaos, calm and cruel. "You should have stayed silent. Kaelen? It was one of their own corps. The resistance fighter who had shared fires, carried supplies, fought by their side. He stepped into the light, his uniform torn, his eyes shining with the cold fire of indoctrination. The Archaeal don't want us gone. They want us remade, stronger, perfect. I chose survival. His weapon was already raised, trained on Mira. Jaren roared and lunged, but the shot came first. Myra crumpled, blood spilling across the console, her hands twitching as sparks danced around her. The device sputtered, its glow faltering, and Kaelen felt something inside her break. Mira had been the mind, the one who turned scraps into weapons, despair into possibility. Without her, the rebellion had no future. Kaelen dropped beside her, clutching her hand, tears mixing with ash on her face. Mira's lips moved, soundless, but Kaelen understood. Finish it. With a cry that tore her throat raw, Kaelen yanked the device free, wires sparking, and plunged it into the core with all her strength. The spire convulsed, light searing the chamber as systems tore themselves apart. The AI screamed in digital agony, and Kaelen screamed with it, feeling as though her own veins were burning. Soldiers fell, convulsing as their implants fried, and the ceiling shuddered as the entire stronghold groaned under the force of the sabotage. But it was not enough. Not yet. The device was dying, the signal fading, and the Archaeal were still pouring in, their shadows blotting out the corridor. Jaren staggered, blood running down his side, and Eldrick was on the ground, unmoving. Mira's last breath rattled in Kaelen's ears. This was the breaking point, the abyss. Their rebellion had come this far only to bleed out in the dark, betrayed and broken, with nothing left but a girl and a failing machine. Kaelen's knees buckled, the fire in her chest guttering. For the first time since the night she lost Rin, she felt the pull of surrender, the seductive weight of silence. Maybe it would be easier to let go. Maybe humanity had fought long enough. Maybe the Archaeal had been right all along. But then she remembered her mother's eyes, fierce even in the moment of loss. She remembered Rin's small hand gripping hers in the dust. She remembered Mira's whispered words, "Finish it." And from the hollow of despair, Kaelen's fire roared back to life, fierce and merciless. Something had to change now. Something with bloodied hands and a voice that carried every scream, every wound, every memory of Earth. Kaelen rose against the storm, knowing that if they were to fall, they would fall not as slaves, but as humans unbroken. The chamber shook as though the planet itself were screaming, the AI core collapsing in a storm of sparks and molten metal. Alien soldiers shrieking as their weapons overloaded, circuits frying in showers of light. Kaelen staggered against the blast, her body scorched, her mind filled with the sound of Myra's dying breath, Jaren's defiant roar, Eldrick's last whispered prayer. She thought this was the end, the glorious, brutal end of a rebellion that had burned brighter than anyone expected, only to be crushed beneath the boot of alien dominion. But then something happened, something none of them had planned, none of them had even believed possible. The AI's death scream didn't fade into silence. It spread. It raced along every wire, every satellite, every orbiting citadel, a chain reaction that made the sky itself flicker like a broken screen. And in that flicker came a revelation that froze Kaelen's blood. The AI wasn't only built by the Archaeal, it wasn't theirs at all. It was human. Buried in the code, hidden beneath layers of alien control. Kaelen saw it flashes of old languages, Earth programming, fragments of names and signatures from long-dead scientists. Humanity hadn't been conquered because it was weak. It had been conquered because it had built the very weapon that enslaved it. The Archaeal had stolen Earth's creation, twisted it into chains, but at its core, the AI still remembered. It remembered human hands. It remembered human voices. And now, with Myra's sacrifice tearing the controls apart, it was waking up. The stronghold's lights died, then reignited in a blaze of white. Alien soldiers froze mid-charge, their bodies locked as their implants seized. One by one, their glowing eyes dimmed, their limbs jerking, weapons dropping. Jaren stumbled to Kaelen's side, his chest heaving, his face bloody, and for the first time she saw something in his scarred expression that wasn't rage or guilt. It was awe. "It's listening to you," he whispered. "It's ours." Kaelen didn't understand. She felt raw, burning, her lungs filling with smoke, but the machine inside her head pulsed like a heartbeat, synced with hers. Words she didn't speak echoed in the chamber, broadcast in every frequency. "We are not broken. We are not erased. We are human." The shockwave rippled outward. Across the globe, drones fell from the skies, their once precise movements glitching into spasms before crashing into ruins. The Archaeal ships above Earth staggered, their systems flickering as the AI they had trusted turned its judgment back upon them. In labor camps, overseers dropped where they stood, their weapons inert, while prisoners looked up for the first time not at machines of oppression, but at skies alive with fire and possibility. Eldrick's eyes fluttered open, weak but alive, and tears streaked his ash-stained face. "We built the chains," he croaked, "but we built the key too." Then came the twist that shook Kaelen to her core. From the static of the broken AI, a voice emerged, not alien, not mechanical, but human, faint, fractured, but undeniably human. Designation: Project Prometheus. Directive: Safeguard humanity. Error: corrupted by foreign code. Correction in progress. Mira hadn't just broken the machine, she had freed it. Earth's forgotten weapon was not a prison, it was a guardian, one buried and repurposed, forced to serve the Archaeal until now. Kaelen dropped to her knees, the enormity of it pressing down on her. Humanity had created something so powerful, so dangerous, that the Archaeal had feared it, stolen it, caged it, and now, unleashed, it was turning its fury not only on the aliens, but on anyone who threatened its makers. Humanity wasn't merely surviving anymore. Humanity was dangerous. The battlefield above Earth transformed overnight. The AI spread like wildfire, infecting Archaeal systems, rewriting protocols, turning their own fleets against them. Ships that had loomed as symbols of invincibility began tearing each other apart, their orbital citadels firing on their own kind as the AI bent their networks to human will. Kaelen watched from the ruins as fire rained from the skies, alien warships burning as if the heavens themselves had chosen sides. Jaren gripped her shoulder, his voice hoarse. "We've turned their empire into our weapon," yet his eyes carried more than triumph, they carried fear. Because no one, not even Kaelen, knew if the thing they had freed was truly under their control. In the silence after the storm, the resistance gathered, fewer than before, but alive. Staring at Kaelen as though she had become something more than flesh and blood, the AI's pulse still throbbed in her veins, every heartbeat echoing with alien screams and human cries. She remembered Rin, remembered his face in the visions, his weapon aimed at her, his eyes hollow. Was he still out there, lost to indoctrination? Could this new power save him or destroy him along with everything else? The questions tore at her, but there was no time for doubt. The Archaeal would regroup. They would not abandon their conquest. They would unleash horrors unseen to reclaim their dominion. But now the balance had shifted. Humanity had a weapon greater than they ever imagined, not a bomb, not a fleet, but an idea brought to life in silicon and fire, that their defiance was not weakness, but evolution. Across the shattered world, humans began to rise. Laborers seized weapons from fallen overseers. Children in indoctrination halls saw the walls flicker and fall, their captors collapsing, and they ran free into the night. The whispers spread faster than fear. The girl made of earth and fire had awoken something ancient, something theirs, something that could never again be caged. And in every whispered breath came a single truth that no alien empire could erase. Humanity had not been conquered. Humanity had been waiting. Kaelen stood at the edge of the ruined core, staring up at the burning sky, her body trembling with exhaustion, her soul burning with something larger. The AI spoke again, clear this time, filling every radio, every drone, every ship. Directive restored: protect humanity, eradicate threat. The words echoed like prophecy, like judgment. Jaren met her gaze, his expression torn between triumph and dread. "We've won," he said. Kaelen shook her head, her voice raw, resolute. "No, we've changed the game." And as the skies split with fire and the first Archaeal reinforcements descended in fury, humanity's secret weapon roared to life not as a machine of control but as an extension of their spirit, their defiance, their will to survive. The aliens had feared the ember. Now they would learn what it meant when humanity's fire became an inferno. The sky above Earth was a war-torn canvas of flame and shadow. 1,000 burning ships bleeding across the heavens as the Archaeal descended in their final bid to crush humanity once and for all. Cities already shattered by decades of occupation now trembled beneath the thunder of orbital bombardments, the ground quaking with each impact. Yet in the midst of ruin, where most species would kneel, humanity stood. Kaelen stood. She felt the AI pulse through her veins like liquid fire, every heartbeat echoing with the rage of her fallen people and the desperate hope of the living. She was exhausted, her body a patchwork of burns, bruises, and scars, but her spirit roared louder than the enemy fleets. This was the endgame not because the Archaeal declared it, but because humanity chose it. On the cliffs overlooking the last resistant stronghold, Jaren tightened the straps of his armor, the metal pitted and scorched, his face streaked with blood and ash. His eyes, once only hardened by rage, now burned with something more dangerous belief. Around them, survivors readied their weapons, scavenged rifles, crude explosives, blades hammered from scrap. It wasn't enough, not against the empire that had enslaved them for generations. But Kaelen knew it never had to be enough. Humans had never fought with numbers or perfection. They fought with fury, with cunning, with the unyielding refusal to die quietly. The AI's voice filled her mind again, steady, almost reverent. Directive: protect humanity. Threat: imminent annihilation. Probability of survival: 0.4%. Kaelen smiled bitterly. Less than 1%? Perfect odds! She raised her weapon, its barrel glowing with stolen alien tech now fused with human ingenuity, and shouted to the fighters at her back, her voice carrying over the roar of bombardments. We don't fight for survival anymore. We fight to remind the universe who we are. The cry ripped from her throat like thunder, and the crowd answered with a roar that shook the valley, a sound so raw and primal it felt older than language itself. The enemy descended in waves, Archeal soldiers with katanas armor and plasma blades, their formations flawless, their numbers overwhelming. Yet the humans struck first, detonating charges that ripped through the valley floor, toppling enemy lines into chaos. Drones swarmed overhead, but the AI bent their protocols, sending half into spirals of self-destruction, while Kaelen's fighters shot the rest from the sky. Jaren waded into the melee with the ferocity of a storm, his blade cutting arcs of light, every strike fueled by years of rage and loss. Eldrick, half broken but unbowed, manned the heavy cannon they'd salvaged, his voice bellowing prayers and curses alike as he tore through Archeal ranks. The battle raged, brutal and merciless, a storm of steel and fire where every heartbeat might be the last. Kaelen moved like lightning, her senses sharpened by the AI synchronization, predicting enemy movements, countering with strikes that turned defense into slaughter. But this wasn't just the AI, it was her the human instinct to adapt, to survive, to win even when every law of probability screamed defeat. And with each kill, each victory torn from the jaws of certain death, the Archeal faltered. Their perfect formations broke, their confidence wavered. For the first time in centuries, the predators of the galaxy realized their prey was fighting back. Then the mothership descended, blotting out the sun. It was a leviathan of war, a vessel large enough to carry entire cities, its weapons capable of erasing continents. Its shadow swallowed the battlefield, its cannons charging with energy that could turn the last human stronghold into glass. The resistance froze, staring up in horror, but Kaelen felt only clarity. This was it. The moment when humanity's spirit would either ignite into legend or be extinguished forever. She turned to Jaren, her voice calm despite the chaos. "We take the ship." His eyes widened. "That's suicide." She grinned through blood and ash. "So is standing here." With the AI coursing through every system, Kaelen reached into the mothership's network. The alien firewalls slammed against her mind, walls of code and memory designed to crush intruders. But she pushed harder, not with precision, but with stubborn, furious will. Human memories poured into the machine. Amira's laughter, Eldrick's prayers, Jaren's rage, her mother's voice whispering lullabies in the ruins of old Earth. The AI amplified it all, a tidal wave of humanity crashing into alien steel. The mothership shuddered midair, its cannons stuttering, its systems glitching under the weight of something it had never been programmed to withstand, the raw defiance of a species that refused to die. Jaren rallied the fighters, leading a desperate charge toward the landing struts as Kaelen tore open the mothership's defenses from within. Explosives ripped apart the hull, humans pouring inside, turning alien corridors into killing fields. Every step forward was paved with blood, but they advanced, unstoppable, their fury greater than their fear. Kaelen fought at their side, her weapon burning, her voice ragged from shouting orders, until at last they reached the core. It was a cathedral of alien design, towering spires of energy and machinery. The heart of the Empire's power pulsing like a living thing. The AI surged in her mind, begging for control, urging her to merge fully, to let it finish what humanity had started. But Kaelen knew the truth. If she gave herself completely, she would no longer be Kaelen. The victory would not be human. It would be hollow. Gritting her teeth, she slammed her hands onto the core, her own mind the conduit, her human flaws the weapon. Pain ripped through her body, her nerves burning, her heart seizing. But she screamed through it, pouring everything she was into the system. Not perfection, not logic, but chaos, creativity, defiance. The core cracked, shuddering, and the mothership wailed like a dying beast. Above Earth, the sky ignited as the mothership's weapons turned inward, its vast arsenal unleashed not upon humanity but upon its own fleet. Alien warships burned in cascades of light, their disciplined armadas dissolving into chaos. The resistance fighters in the corridors roared as the ship shuddered, its death throes shaking the galaxy itself. Jaren dragged Kaelen from the core, her body limp, her skin scorched, but her eyes blazing with triumph. "We did it," he whispered. She coughed blood, smiling weakly. "No, we did it." The mothership fell, a burning titan crashing into the sea with a roar that silenced the battlefield. Across the world, alien forces collapsed without command, their empire undone by the very humans they had sought to erase. Survivors emerged from bunkers, camps, and ruins, staring at the skies now clear for the first time in generations. And in that silence, a new sound rose, not the roar of battle, but the roar of humanity, a unified cry that shook the stars. Kaelen awoke days later, her body broken but alive, Jaren at her side, Eldric's prayers echoing faintly in the distance. The AI was quieter now, no longer a master, but a partner. Its voice a steady whisper in the back of her mind. Directive fulfilled. Humanity endures. She looked out at the horizon, the ruins bathed in dawn light, and for the first time in her life, she saw not just survival, but victory. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. Now it would remember them forever. The girl made of earth and fire had lit a flame no empire could extinguish, and the roar of her people would echo into eternity. The war was over, but the silence afterward was almost harder to bear. Earth lay scarred, a patchwork of shattered cities, burned forests, and oceans lit with the wreckage of alien steel, but it was free. For the first time in living memory, no Archeal patrols stalked the skies, no overseers barked orders in the streets, no indoctrination halls whispered lies into the ears of children. Humanity had clawed its way back from extinction, and though the cost was unspeakable, the victory was undeniable. Kaelen stood on the ruins of the citadel where she had once been chained, the morning light washing over her battered frame, and she thought of every soul who had fallen to make this dawn possible. Mira, who had given her last breath so the AI could remember its true purpose, Eldric, whose faith had carried men and women through despair, Jaren, who had once fought only for vengeance, but learned to fight for something greater. Even Rin, her friend turned enemy, a boy consumed by alien lies who had reminded her, in his final moment, that humans were more than their scars. Their legacies lived in her veins, and in the pulse of the AI that whispered softly in the back of her mind, directive fulfilled. Humanity evolves. Rebuilding was not easy. The world was fractured, its ecosystems broken, its people scattered across ruins and wilderness. But humans did what they had always done. Farmers reclaimed the poisoned soil, engineers stripped alien wreckage for technology, children played in the shadows of fallen motherships, laughing where once there had only been screams. The resistance transformed into leaders, not warriors, guiding their fractured species toward unity instead of survival. No longer slaves, no longer prey, humanity began to write its next chapter, not as victims of conquest, but as architects of their own future. And the galaxy was watching. The Archeal had been humbled, their empire gutted by their own weapon turned against them. Other alien species, once silent out of fear, now whispered of Earth's defiance with awe. The humans fought back. The humans won. In backwater systems and hidden colonies, the myth of the girl made of earth and fire spread like wildfire, a story too unbelievable to ignore, yet too powerful to deny. Humanity had become more than just a freed species. They were a warning, a promise, a spark of fear in every would-be conqueror's heart. But Kaelen knew that survival alone wasn't enough. The AI had revealed a truth too dangerous to ignore. Humanity had once reached for the stars, had created wonders so powerful they were feared by entire empires. That knowledge, buried and stolen, was their inheritance. Now, as survivors rebuilt cities, as laughter returned to the ruins, humanity faced its greatest choice: to remain on a scarred earth and heal, or to rise again, to carry their fire back into the stars. For Kaelen, there was no choice at all. Earth was sacred, but it was not a cage. Humanity's spirit had always been to explore, to risk, to push beyond limits, to evolve, and with alien fleets broken, with the AI as both guide and ally, the path forward was clear. They would leave Earth, not in chains, but in triumph. The last scene burned itself into legend. The first human fleet, ragtag and mismatched, rising from Earth's surface, ships built from alien wreckage fused with human ingenuity, painted not in sterile grays but in defiant colors, their hulls marked with names of lost cities, lost families, lost heroes. Kaelen watched from the command deck of the lead vessel, Jaren at her side. Eldric's prayers encoded into the ship's systems, Mira's name carved into the hull. Behind them, billions of eyes turned upward, watching as humanity rose once more to claim the stars. And when the ships cleared the atmosphere, breaking into the vast silence of space, Kaelen whispered the words that became humanity's new creed. We are not broken, we are not erased, we are human. That single sentence echoed through the centuries. To some, it was a reminder of pain. To others, a song of triumph. To all, it was proof that when faced with annihilation, humanity had not only resisted but changed. Human evolution was not about perfection or power, it was about resilience, about choosing to endure when surrender seemed easier, about finding meaning even in ashes. That was the legacy of the species, not the scars on Earth, but the fire in their souls. So when the galaxy spoke of Earth, it did not speak of conquest or defeat. It spoke of redemption, of a people who refused to die quietly, of an alien resistance so fierce it redefined what survival meant. And in every shadow of the universe, in every empire that dreamed of domination, the same thought lingered. If humanity could rise from ashes once, what might they become tomorrow? And for those who lived it, for those who rebuilt the ruins and carried the fire into the stars, there was no fear left. Only promise, only defiance, only the roar of a species that had been underestimated one last time.